Hello everybody and welcome to this video. It's another in the Student Exemplar series. Here is a comparison of tissue and Ozymandias sent in by a student who wanted to remain anonymous, which is absolutely fine, but I think this is an analysis that is going to help a lot of you, so let's jump right into it. So the question was, compare the ways writers present human power as temporary in Tissue and one other poem. In both poems, Tissue by Imtiaz Darka and Ozymandias by Percy Shelley, the theme of transience is prominent in outlining the temporary nature of power, especially when it descends from a political outlook. So I see that as very much the introduction to this answer, and I think it's nice. It really makes it clear what the student is going to explore. In her poem, Darka makes the explicit reference to capitals and monoliths, which she employs as symbols of government and therefore politics. The tactical positioning of the lexis script in the poem, which is followed by the political reference, suggests to the audience that Darka believes that we as a society are being forced to share certain beliefs by those in power. We are compelled to believe and act upon what we are told, even if we don't share the same viewpoint. However, Darka presents implications that the power and control the government has upon us is transient. It is unable to stand the test of time, and eventually it will be taken away in some form. This ideology is supported by the poet's use of the phrase, "let the daylight break through." The noun daylight is significant, as it is a symbolic for hope, implying that there is still hope for the people to break the power of the politically powerful. Moreover, the imperative verb let displays a harsher tone, highlighting the importance behind Darka's message: we are weak like tissue if we don't make a change. Now, I like this opening paragraph because I think what the student has managed to do is to take a very obscure aspect of the poem and link it very clearly to their analysis in terms of answering this question. So I think this is very good, and I think it's the structural analysis of the tactical positioning of the word script, and then the language analysis of daylight. So really nice. Similarly, the theme of transience is conveyed in an almost identical form in Ozymandias. Shelley utilizes the protagonist of Ozymandias as a reference to King Ramesses II, who, in ancient Egyptian times, was a pharaoh. Ramesses had large, brash monuments built of himself as symbols of his extensive power. In the poem itself, the dialogue, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings," coherently expresses to the reader the nature of Ozymandias' selfishness. The use of dialogue makes it evident to the reader that these words have come directly from Ozymandias himself, and therefore we begin to build a negative perception of the protagonist, as it's clear he is extremely egotistical. The contextual reference King of Kings echoes what we know used to be a name given to Jesus, and this outlines how Ozymandias believes his power is godlike. This idea is supported by the translation of Ozymandias. Ozy refers to Ozium, which means to breathe, and Mandias to mandate, which means to rule. Therefore, from his name itself, we're presented with the perception that Ozymandias literally lives to breathe power and to rule over others. And this emphasizes his obsessiveness over the need for power. So if we just pause there for a second, because there's a few ideas here. Lots of evidence really backing up the same thing here, and I think that's good. It's not like these quotations are sort of at odds with each other. They're all making the same point, which is good. However, as with tissue, this power is undermined by the underlying theme of transience. In the poem, we learn that Ozymandias' statue is destroyed in a deserted desert, two vast and trunkless legs of stone, shattered visage. The fact the statue is in the middle of a desert presents the idea of isolation, informing to the reader that the destruction of the statue has no human input. Therefore, we can deduce that the damage that was done by nature, implying that nature is more powerful than man. The adjective shattered has vivid connotations of violence and destruction, suggesting that nature has much more power in comparison to man. Ozymandias believed his power would last forever. However, the plosive alliteration of boundless and bare reiterates the theme of transience. Nothing belonging to man will outrun the test of time. Now, I'm just going to pause there, because here's the first glimpse of something that I'm not, convinced by. This line here, okay, the plosive alliteration of boundless and bare reiterates the theme of transience. Nothing belonging to man will outrun the test of time. The bit that's missing here is how does the plosive alliteration reiterate the theme of transience? And this is what happens a lot with poetry. We know something, oh, there's some plosive alliteration, but we need to be able to explain how it proves our point, and I don't feel the student does that here. I'm not saying it's wrong, it just needed one more sentence to explain it. The adjective bare expresses emptiness and nothingness, and we see this as a reflection of the end of Ramesses II, as it is located at the end of the poem. His large monuments are all deserted and meaningless. So that could have been a nice structure point in itself, couldn't it, about the significance of it being at the end. In addition to this, both poets somewhat distance themselves from their poems in order to avoid being penalised for their opinions. Dacre and Shelley both address political issues in their poems. However, understandably, this can cause conflict with those with opposing views. In context, we're aware that Shelley was removed from university due to his strong opinions on atheism. He also shared strong political views on the current king at the time, King George III. King George III was heavily involved in military conflicts across the world, and this is something Shelley strongly disagreed with. Therefore, we can interpret his poem as a thinly veiled attack on King George III, who clearly reflects Ramesses II, who was also involved in many conflicts. However, as Shelley begins his poem with "I once met a traveller," he is shielding his opinion as someone else's and therefore distancing himself from the poem. This can be interpreted as a real example of how those in power intimidate the society below them. However, the theme of transience is once again employed, as today not many people will remember King George III, yet many more will be aware of Percy Shelley. Therefore, at the time, although King George saw himself as extremely powerful, especially for having such active involvement in military conflicts, his power clearly did not last. I like that paragraph. Those points are pretty much taken from my analysis video of the poem. Remember, I do have a video of analysis of every poem in the Power and Conflict playlist, so do have a look at that. In a similar means, Dacre also distances herself from her poem, as she purposefully chose to title the poem Tissue, which itself is very ambiguous. Tissue could refer to material, however, it could also be a reference to human tissue. Furthermore, the material of tissue is highly equivocal, as it can be strong yet easily torn. It can be opaque, yet when put under light it is transparent. Therefore, we instantly build the perception that Dacre's poem is impressionistic poetry, of which we are encouraged to construct an opinion upon. The poet utilises tissue and paper as an extended metaphor of what could be interpreted in numerous ways. However, with frequent indirect references to government, money and power, it suggests that the metaphor is for the power of man. Human power is extremely fragile and, like tissue, can easily be damaged. This highlights the theme of transience. However, the fact that Dacre presents her poem in such an unexplicit form implies that she was unwilling to openly express her judgment on politics and government. And this ideology is supported by the frequent use of modals throughout the poem: could, might, might. Similarly, this implies that Dacre is not making a solid judgment in her poem. Therefore, like Shelley, it seems Dacre is weary of expressing a full opinion. Now, I love this paragraph. I think it's very, very good. I think, the fact that Tissue is such a sort of difficult poem to get your head around. I think, what is this poem actually saying? But the student here has been able to say, and this is why. I think that's fantastic. You'll note, by the way, that this is quite a long answer. And some of you might look at this and say, well, I could never write that much. And others will think, yeah, I could write that much. The amount that people can write varies massively in the exam. And it's never about how much you can write. It's just or how much you should write, I should say. It's about how much you can write in the time given. Some people can write 2 pages, some people can write 5 pages, but obviously what we're looking for is a quality analysis of language structure and form and context. Whether that's over 2 pages or 5 shouldn't be the key sort of deciding factor on the grade that you get. From a structural perspective, both poems express transience. In Tissue, the poem is constructed of 9 quatrains ending in a single-line stanza. The poem itself follows no particular form and therefore is written in free verse. However, it does have an irregular rhyme scheme. In addition to this, there are masses of enjambment throughout the poem, and we interpret this as a reflection of society's reliance on the powerful. The forced break mirrors how we are constantly waiting on those in power to order us, and how we are not in control of our own opinions. The fact that this is and has been an ongoing occurrence for many, many years is reflected by the uniformity of 9 quatrains. Wow, I love that. What I love about this is, apart from that one moment that I mentioned, this student is finding things in the poem and then linking them to the question, which is so good. However, Darker suggests that this power, like all power, is transient as a final stanza of just one line. This breaks the form of the poem and therefore implies that the political power they have over us will also break. This idea is supported by the phrase, "Let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths." The symbol of light is significant here as it presents hope for what is to come. Likewise, Shelley also presents the theme of transience through the form of his poem. His use of an adapted form of a sonnet expresses to the reader how the sonnet is changed to suit Shelley. The original form of a sonnet was adapted by Shakespeare and now has been changed again for the poem of Ozymandias. This simple factor expresses how power is transient. It is constantly changed and passed down in a similar way to the sonnet. So this last paragraph, you can see that this is the student getting to the end of the exam time and perhaps having to just rush this idea in a very short paragraph. But this is a very strong answer. A lot of people regularly say to me, "Mr. Bruff, can you give these student exemplars a mark or a grade?" And I don't do that. And I'll tell you why. Number one, because the grades are, so ambiguous, nobody really knows at the moment. But the other thing is, it doesn't actually help to say this would get this mark, this would get this mark. What helps is to say, look, let's have a look at this, and let's say, this is good, this could be better, and let's learn from it. And that is the key thing with these student exemplars. If you enjoyed the video, please do subscribe to the channel.